And gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Armchair Producers, episode 77, in fact. I am one of your hosts, George Terran, alongside the man, the myth, the arcade cabinet collector, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I'm fine and dandy. I don't think owning one makes me a collector.
Shut up.
No, I wouldn't mind collecting. I mean, if it had a lot of space.
A lot of space and a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Money's a thing. Like, I was looking today at I noticed some, when you buy anything, like Facebook all of a sudden knows you've bought something, and so now your feed is now flooded with ads for the thing.
Yeah.
And so tonight I was getting ads for people who are auctioning pinball machines, and like $10,000 for some of these machines.
Yeah, there's some big money in those, apparently.
I did see a Last Action Hero one for $3,500. I was tempted. I mean, that's a lot of money for a pinball machine, and I don't particularly care for pinball that much. But it would be cool because I think we both like that movie.
Yeah, and I do appreciate pinball. I do enjoy dabbling in it from time to time. Even some of the digital stuff on the consoles and things, it can even be fun just doing that. But not enough to lay down $3,500. That's a big slice of cheddar. All right, well, shall we get straight into the meat and potatoes of this episode?
Back on, because this week we are talking about a film I think I'd forgotten that I enjoyed as much as I did.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I always think back to this movie and go, yeah, that's good. And every time I watch it, it's like, wow, that's better than I remember it.
Very much so. It was, I can't remember the last time I saw Point. So the film this week, for those who are playing from home, which hopefully are most of you, is Point Break, the 1991 Keanu Reeves, Patrick Swayze surfing / bank robbery film. Yeah. Directed by Kathryn Bigelow. Yep. Written by Kathryn Bigelow, and apparently uncredited, but also written by her, at the time, husband and collaborator, James Cameron. Which, not just Kathryn Bigelow, who is a fine filmmaker, but I think it explains the edge that this film has. It really takes it above the level of what one might expect of a early 90s action / heist film about surfing and skydiving.
I don't know if I would necessarily attribute that to Jim Cameron at all, because when you look at Kathryn Bigelow's filmography, it's generally pretty gritty and dark. You look at she did The Loveless, Near Dark, Blue Steel, then Point Break, Strange Days, The Weight of Water, K-19, which is possibly her most average movie. The Hurt Locker. There's always been that. She's definitely got a way that she likes to tell her stories, I think.
She is solid. A solid filmmaker. Yeah. I think she's a good filmmaker, and I was one of it. I know a lot of people didn't like The Hurt Locker and thought that was kind of a charity Oscar. But again, James Cameron should have got it for Avatar, which I would not have agreed with.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you think at the time James Cameron was coming off Aliens, Terminator 2 came out the same year as this film. He moved on and made films like True Lies. The guy was on the hottest, and then after that, of course, a little film called Titanic. Hottest of hot streaks at the time. And I just think, while I think Kathryn's a highly competent director, a very good director, I actually found myself wanting to go back and watch Zero Dark 30 after watching this film.
Same, actually, yeah.
I think James is both a great director and a great writer, which I'm not sure I would say Kathryn. I would say Kathryn's quite on the same page, and I'll probably get shouted down for being a misogynist or something. As a writer, if you look at her credits for writing, Near Dark, Blue Steel, Loveless earlier, Equalizer, a TV show, and a movie called Undertow in '96 that I've never heard of. As a writer, she's a great director.
I would put 1 point of umbrage on this, and you said that Jim Cameron is a great writer. He is not a great writer. He is very good at reconstituting stories for the masses in a modern-day ideology. There's not actually great writing in the Terminator movies. it's fantastic movies, and he just kind of goes, all right, I've got a shit ton of exposition to tell in the first one, so let's just make it basically a chase sequence. So the adrenaline is constantly going, and they're able to talk, and it feels like it's amazing. But then you look at like the writing in Avatar, it's like, okay, this movie is set years and years and years and years and years and years in the future. There is no way that someone would reference Ranger Rick. It's something that Sigourney Weaver's character pulls out. It's like, no, come on.
I think, let me rephrase. I think, well, I guess it depends what you call a great writer. I mean, one might say, I think Aaron Sorkin's a fucking great writer. Joss Whedon, at his best, is a great writer. Quentin Tarantino is an incredible writer.
Yes.
And at his best. I guess I'd say James Cameron is maybe not on the same level as those guys. But when it comes to blockbuster Hollywood movies, very, very few people, Spielberg would be one, but James Cameron, I think you could put in the same class as when it comes to writing really high quality Hollywood blockbuster films. At that point in time, I mean, Avatar, I think Avatar is possibly the weakest thing potentially he's done since Piranha 2. And I think it's massively overrated. The fact that it got anywhere near the Oscars for anything other than special effects is crazy. But I think at the time, like I said, we'd come across, he wrote Rambo, First Blood Part 2, which is a solid film. I watched it again recently. Aliens, The Abyss, Terminator's in there, Terminator 2, into True Lies, into Titanic. Strange Days as well, which is the other film you mentioned, Catherine Bigelow, which is a highly underrated film. The guy was flat out knocking scripts out of the fucking park for 10 years there. And I think this film's dialogue, to go back to Point Break, it is a lot more fun and a lot more funny and a lot more engaging than it has any right to be.
Absolutely. It doesn't get at all to the point with the dialogue and the snappiness of the dialogue of something like Shane Black, particularly in Shane Black's sort of like primo time. But it's got that kind of element to it. And I think kind of using Shane Black as a reference point for how this movie comes about is kind of similar, and because they've got that, it's a gritty story. Like the first Lethal Weapon movie is like Martin Riggs is a genuinely fucked up, broken character, but they've got these little bits of comedy in there, and just the snappiness of the dialogue between them, and you get little elements of that, not to that degree, through Gary Busey and Keanu Reeves interactions and the bromance that so quickly but so beautifully gets built up between Keanu and Patrick. It's really well done. I think how I would rate, just to finish off our Jim Cameron thing, is he is one of the very best still in the business to be able to be the whole package. He writes solid scripts. He directs solid movies. He produces great movies. He knows how to kind of pull everything together to really get that package good. And you can definitely feel his touch on this movie.
I think he was, I mean, again, not to disrespect Catherine Bigelow, who's a very fine director. I just think his writing helped elevate this film. As I said, to a point it had no reason to be. If someone had said it's a film about a gang of surfers who are bank robbers who go skydiving, and a guy called Johnny Utah who is an FBI agent who has to infiltrate the surfy gang to take down the bank robbers, you'd be like, that sounds fucking cheesy as fuck.
And the remake was, which I watched as well.
I think if you can take some A-grade talent, they can take B material and, disguise it as A material. And there's talent all the way through this. So we've covered the writing.
Yeah.
You've covered it. Gary Busey is in this film, and this is Gary Busey doing some of his best work. Not playing a bad guy for a change, which is so weird. Keanu Reeves in his first real action Hollywood blockbuster type role. Before we think of him now as Mr. Blockbuster, right? But in the early '90s, he was coming off the Bill and Ted films, I think he's been doing some more Shakespearean type productions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he'd done a lot of art house stuff, basically.
So this, and now, I think there was some. You read about it. There's some doubt about whether he was marketable enough to actually headline this film. Which is hindsight, you go, "What the fuck are you talking about?" You read the trivia on IMDb, but they were talking it to people like Matthew Broderick and Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp, I could see pulling this role off, but Matthew Broderick and Willem Dafoe, apparently, you're like, whoa, no, thanks.
It's so weird.
He's a great director, don't get me a great actor, don't get me wrong. Willem Dafoe's a wonderful actor, but as a leading man, as a young FBI agent playing a surfer, I don't think so.
Yeah, it would. I'm just kind of thinking of they because I find it impossible to actually think of Willem Dafoe as young ever. I just cannot picture him as a child, as a young actor. So the idea
of the Streets of Rage, we started this whole thing.
Yeah. He looked older than what he actually was. He's always looked older than what he was. But he's a handsome guy. But the idea of him playing a 25-year-old surfer dude is like, wow, they would have had to do some rewrites because no one's going to believe that.
I wouldn't have thought so, but that was sort of where Keanu was at. So this is Keanu's big breakout into blockbuster action films. On top of that, we have, of course, Patrick Swayze, who was a bona fide star at this point in time after Dirty Dancing. I think Roadhouse came out a year or two before this.
Yeah. This came out just before Ghost, so he was really cresting on a high right there.
He was hot at that point in time. And you've mentioned that they have this incredible bromance chemistry between the two of them, which, again, kudos to the casting director for sort of getting those two. And again, Keanu and Gary Busey have this great chemistry between the two of them, between the veteran cop and the young upstart who start out not liking each other. Yeah. Very similar in a way, in some ways, to the chemistry between Mel Gibson and Danny Glover in the Lethal Weapon film. So it was very familiar chemistry or sort of tropes at this point in time. In amongst them, we have our connection to last week. We have John C. McGinley playing the captain.
Yep.
Who's obviously very disapproving of his, the way his charges are going about this case. We have Tom Sizemore in a very small role.
I forgot that he was in there, and then suddenly pops up and I go, oh shit, yeah, that's right.
Laurie Petty, the woman of the 90s, the woman who was everywhere in the 90s in films.
Yeah. Tank Girl herself.
Tank Girl, she was in Dumb and Dumber. She's playing, of course, the love interest, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
For music fans, there is a very young Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers playing one of the thug surfers who beat up Keanu Reeves on the beach. And you're like, oh wow, he's so young.
Yeah.
And so, but all of this just seems to work, right? Like it all. I mean, the chemistry between these guys is so important to the point where I have heard theories of an almost homoerotic relationship between Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves. Now, I can't see it myself, but it's an interesting way to analyze the film.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's... This was, when you think about Patrick Swayze at this point in his life, he was possibly the biggest heartthrob out there, especially with, just coming just before Ghost as well, where everyone fell in love with him. This role was, it kind of stands out as quite different to a lot of his other stuff. And I am so, every time I see some of his things, like Roadhouse is, I would qualify that as a top quality B movie.
Absolutely. It isn't well remembered now. And it's honestly not very good. And I should note, actually, this film came out after Ghost. Ghost came out in 1990, Point Break in 91.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So you're 100% right in the sense that actually strengthens your point, though. So it was coming off Dirty Dancing and Ghost. And people, again, I don't think Ghost is well remembered today. But it was a huge hit in 1990. I mean, Whoopi Goldberg won an Oscar. There were songs like The Righteous Brothers, Unchained Melody. Was a huge, huge hit from the movie. He was hot property. Patrick Swayze was possibly one of the biggest stars in the world at this point in time.
Yeah.
And to go from that to being the bad guy in film is quite a bold choice in a way. But the word on the street is he did actually audition for the role of Johnny Utah, but was cast as Bodhi because he liked skydiving, apparently.
Yeah, yeah. Which, anyone who's done skydiving, as soon as you see Johnny Utah skydive for the first time and that transition from "oh fuck" to "wow awesome," everyone goes through that, and it is amazing.
You've done it?
Yeah, I did it for charity. Still, when I was back in the UK,
I would
love to do it again because it's amazing.
Okay, well, it is almost a year to your birthday next year. I'll start saving for it.
But my point, though, 1 second, is with Patrick Swayze, every time I look back at it, even his performance in Roadhouse is solid. I don't like the movie, but his performance in Dirty Dancing is great. This is great. Ghost is great. And I really fucking loved the way that he portrayed the creepy, pseudo-culty guy in Donnie Darko. He was a fucking good actor.
That's I love that the trajectory of his career. It's like, I think he was in Red Dawn, if I'm not mistaken. Then it was like Dirty Dancing, and he was a huge star, Roadhouse, Ghost, Point Break. Hit. Nothing happened for 10 years. Then he was in Donnie Darko, then he died.
Yeah, it's so sad. And it's a great missed opportunity, I think. I mean, maybe it was just personal choice of him choosing different things, but, I just kind of look at him and kind of wonder, what if, with so many other potential roles, because he was really good at being able to bring something out, and the levels that he goes to as the character of Bodhi are fantastic. He is this bodacious, surfer guy, and he's kind of zen and
incredibly charismatic, almost cult leader-like.
Yeah, and that definitely comes across in so many of the fireside conversations that he has with Johnny and the rest of his crew and things like that. And the way that Laurie Petty's Tyler character talks about him, sort of like, oh yeah, he can smell that a mile off, and he'll take you to the edge, Johnny. And it's like, yeah, it's a cult like thing, but for the first 45 minutes of the movie, you really like this fucking guy. And
I think that's the thing all the way through the film is you kind of he is a very atypical villain. He's not your mustache twirling, villain who ties the damsel in distress to the railroad tracks. So he kind of does in a way because he does kidnap Laurie Petty's character. But even at the very end, it's hard to remember now because the end of his film is so iconic in a way that you probably are almost as much on side for him in a way, but it's almost you're on side for his relationship with Johnny as much as you are for Bodhi. But he is so charismatic. The film kind of in some ways reminded me of a little bit, and this is a stretch, I'll pay, but was Heat.
I was just actually thinking that, especially with the heists.
The heists. If you think about Robert De Niro's character in that, and Tom Sizemore again, and Val Kilmer, especially Robert De Niro's character, he is the bad guy, right? He's a bank robber. He's a violent criminal. Yeah, but he's essentially the hero of the film, the protagonist at the very least. And you have a very conflicted feeling at the end of that film when we have a final confrontation with him and Al Pacino. I guess you're happy. I mean, spoilers if you haven't seen Heat. It was fucking 25 years ago. Yeah. You're a little bit sad that he gets shot in the end, but and also just the charismatic and likable bank robber is an unusual film trope. Yeah, but he is so competent in selling it, and his relationship with all of the actors around him is so good that you utterly believe it. And it's been parodied in Hot Fuzz, where they're shooting up into the sky, going "ah!" because you can't take the shot against the man you've got. You've built a friendship with. I actually loved him. He loved him almost. Is that a platonic love? Is that somehow romantic? I mean, I didn't see it myself, but you can interpret that however you like. But there was an actual love between his characters, and he could not shoot him at that time. Though I do find this film does, just to go take a dive away from the love fest that it's been so far, this film does strain credulity at several points in the film. I mean, first of all, in the raid where Johnny and Gary Busey's character raid the first group of surfer thugs they think might be the bank robbers.
Oh yes, with War Child.
War Child and Gromit and these guys. And they turn up and there is Keanu, Gary Busey, and two other guys.
Yep.
And potentially, I think these guys could be the most dangerous / infamous bank robbery gang going around at the time, and you take 4 guys.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen the American police before? Are you familiar with how they work? I mean, like, there would be a fucking, platoon of fucking cops for that kind of rate. The fact there were already 4 guys, nuts. I'm sorry. That strain cricket pulled me out a little bit and go, come on. I know this is what needs to happen for the story, that, the things that we need to happen, but that was like, that strained credulity to me. The other part was like basically when we have Keanu and Gary Busey chasing after, the dead former presidents, the ex-presidents, whatever they call themselves.
Ex-presidents, yes.
Ex-presidents, sorry. The ex-presidents, after the second bank robbery we see, obviously they get away. Even when we have a famous scene where Johnny shoots his gun up in the air because he can't shoot Bodhi. Why don't they just have an APB out on these guys? Because Johnny knows exactly who they are.
Yeah,
he knows. Look like he knows who they. Why is he? Why is he? He going after them. Fucking him and Gary Busey are going after them solo the whole time. It's like, And then the idea that Keanu would, but they go skydiving together. Like, why would Keanu ever agree to go skydiving when he knows that Bodhi is a bank robber and he knows that Bodhi knows he's an FBI agent? So
yeah,
they keep up this pretense of the fact that they pretend they don't know who each other are for this one last skydiving trip. Why would you? No way you would put yourself in that situation, because you just know. Like, I mean, obviously he doesn't get killed, but the logical thing to do, you'd be like, these guys are going to fucking kill me while I'm skydiving with them. That would be the easy. So that was a bit like, why would you do that? Like, why would you? And he says, like, hey, come meet us and do this thing. Why wouldn't you just have a fucking squad of cops turn up and arrest the fuck out of everybody? And again, I know this is what needed to happen to get the film, the plot to move along. But it's like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I guess I kind of just went along for the ride. I totally get what you're saying, but for me, it was just they could have played up a little bit of that cat and mouse thing, because there's subtle elements of it. Like there's that meeting of sort of like, what are we going to do? We just got to run, aren't we, Bodhi? And there's like, no, I know what to do with the FBI agent. It's fine. And then him going and just kind of forcibly getting Johnny out of the flat by saying, like, let's get some pants, get some socks, and things like that. So like, he wants to just take his friend out, but at the same time, he's forcing him to. And you get that brief little moment where Johnny tries to go for his gun, but he doesn't get the chance. And the kind of pseudo or implied Russian roulette of the bad bag that you think, oh, it's not going to open, there's not going to be a shoot in there or anything like that. And it just ending up being this exuberant outcry of fear going into absolute elation as they're coming down and they're all working together as a team. And you do kind of go, okay, I don't know where they're going with this now, because we've just had the revelation that they know who each other is, but they're still playing it off and they're coming together. And then the real kick in the balls of him saying, hey, Johnny, I want to show you something. And it's just this. And the look on Bodhi's face as he's doing it, it's like he's ashamed of himself. It's like, okay, I'll pay it. They played that relatively
They did that reasonably well. I guess the part that didn't work for me is like, if his plan was, let's go to Mexico and take the money and escape, why did they need to have that thing with Johnny at all? Like, why did they need to kidnap Laurie Petty at all when they were free?
Because reasons.
Reasons, because the film, the plot needed it to happen.
Yes.
So I guess I'm being a little bit picky. It's just like, And if I can just give one last slug in the guts to this film, it was the 90s, and I would say there were probably less Australian actors in Hollywood in the 90s than I think today. I think finding an Australian actor in Hollywood today would be pretty straightforward. There are so many of them.
Yeah.
Even if you don't want to actually fly the second unit to Australia to film a scene, you want to film it in California like we did. The final scene in this film, supposedly at Bells Beach in Torquay, which is a couple of hours from here. You know, if you don't want to fly to Australia and get a second unit shoot, fine. You don't want to fly Keanu there, fine. Surely, find yourself some Australians in Hollywood who can do the accent. Like, I think until Quentin Tarantino's accent in Django Unchained, these might be the worst Australian accents I've ever heard in a Hollywood production. And I think Quentin's in the conversation with them. They're pretty bad. Okay, when he comes back in!
Well, for a great many years, basically, all of it, the idea of Australia that was being pimped was Crocodile Dundee. That was it. So,
I mean, as I said, surely you could have found someone who could do a better version of the accent than that. The other part, this is just like, and maybe you've had this because obviously growing up and spending a lot of time in London, not growing up, but having spent a lot of time in London, you've probably had this experience where they shoot something in London and you're like, hang on, that's nowhere near that. You know, or, I assume they shoot so much stuff in London, they probably shoot in location there a lot more readily than they would here. But having been to Bells Beach a few times, I'm not a servant, but I've been there. It looks nothing like that. Not even remotely close to what Bells Beach looks like.
Oh, but this was in 1990, so, things can change pretty quickly, Travis.
I grew up in that part of the world. Not in Bells Beach. Torquay's just down not too far from where no, it looks nothing like that. And so I guess, for the 99.9% of people who saw this film, they wouldn't have a fucking clue what Bells Beach looks like. Yeah. But, it's... because so few films are ever set in and around where I live.
Yeah.
You are very critical, and you like when you saw Ghost Rider, you're like, that's not Texas, that's the Yangs.
I'm sorry, but you can't have a superhero doing things in a place called the Yangs. It just doesn't make any... It's like, trying to have an epic fight between God and the devil and having it set in the French town of Brest.
In fucking Wollongong, mate.
Yeah, there's just some places where it's like, you know what? Location-wise, this is perfect, but can we change the name?
Well, there's occasionally are films shot here in Melbourne. They're rare, but occasionally we see them scoot from here to here, and you're like, that's kilometres away from there. But so it's a minor gripe. The accents are horrible, and they have no excuse for the accents. They have a very reasonable excuse that no one would really give a shit what Bells Beach looked like. But knowing and having been there, I'm like, come on, that's not really... Yeah, but it is must say, the end of a film, apart from the fact the unconvincing accents and knowing the real location looks nothing like what they shot. It's a wonderful way to end the film.
It's a fantastic ending.
Just that really vague, did he get away? Did he not? According to James Cameron, he did not. He committed suicide.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderfully vague way to end the film, where so many of these films would have ended up in a shootout.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But it just, that final scene just did reinforce beautifully, again, the bromance between them. He's hunted him all over the world, and come the opportunity, he's got him handcuffed.
Yeah.
Bodhi can't kill Johnny, and Johnny can't take Bodhi in.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, a lesser movie would have probably gone, oh, you know what would be great? This is the moment where Johnny becomes a better surfer than Bodhi, and they both go out to ride this big wave. And as they come in, Johnny saves Bodhi from the water, like what Bodhi did at the start of the movie. So it echoes that. That'll be amazing. And then he arrests him. And they're like, no, just no. Leave it. You don't need to answer every question.
And this is, again, where I think the writing takes this film to another level. Whereas
that's fair.
I think this film did spark many imitators. The whole extreme sports thing, that kind of thing. And I'm thinking of films like Terminal Velocity, which starring Charlie Sheen a few years later, and Gary Busey.
Oh,
Um,
of course.
So the films where or Cliffhanger to a lesser extent, like had an extreme sports angle on, or Hackers, I think maybe owes some of its heritage to a film like Point Break.
It's that counterculture kind of movies.
Counterculture sort of spinning into a crime thing.
Yeah.
Terminal Velocity, I think, has a much straighter line, but it spawned many imitators. And I think, again, usually the original is better than most, but the talent involved in actually creating this screenplay, I think, is what, and the balls to actually kind of finish a film like that.
Yeah.
Which, maybe a lesser director, as you say, would not have had, or wouldn't have had the kind of clout to get that past the studio.
Yeah.
I'm sure, I mean, on paper, Johnny becomes a better surfer and rescues Bodhi and takes him in. Sounds like a fucking great ending, but, it wouldn't have filmed anywhere near as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other sort of thing I'd like to sort of point out in this film, from a technical perspective, is how good is the camera work in this film?
It is. I would love to actually. I'm going to look into it. I might not do it live now, but so much of the color usage as they're filming it, particularly the sunrise and sunset sequence where it's so heavily starchly kind of orangey kind of hues and things like that. That's so iconic, or so recognizable as something that a lot of those more serious action movies use. All of the references have just completely gone out of my head. But that idea of going back to Heat, there was that kind of color palette that they had for it throughout, the blues that were just covering everything and that sort of stuff. There was elements of that coming in, and the surfing footage, it just looked great. I mean, none of the waves were sort of like, oh my god, that's a monster of a wave and they're riding it, that's awesome, but it still looked great, and you were getting these good close-ups of the characters doing these moves and just resting, and I
would also like to call out the foot chase after the bank robbery between Johnny and Bodhi while he's still dressed as Ronald Reagan. It's an incredible foot chase. It's almost like a car chase, but I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say, but it's so brilliantly shot. And you can find some details in the trivia section on IMDb about what they did. They used some special camera shit, and they borrowed some Steadicam stuff, but just the way it was shot was just incredibly exciting and visceral, and you felt like you were right there. And I mean, it's become that kind of thing. Again, I think many films today probably owe a debt to Point Break. I'm not saying nobody had done a foot chase like this before. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I haven't thought about it too deeply. But I think you look at films like the Bourne films, where this was kind of a standard thing, like jumping over rooftops, or the James Bond films that have used parkour. Was that Casino Royale that did that? I can't remember. But one of the James...
no, it was the start of the Quantum of Solace.
Quantum of Solace.
Yeah.
Where using that sort of parkour, jumping over rooftops, has become a trope in its own. But I think this is kind of doing it very early on in the development of that kind of technology that will allow that to actually happen and be shot in a convincing way. So that chase is one of the great chase scenes in cinema history.
I would agree, and I just searched best foot chases in movies, and the top hit was 5 best movie chases by Volta. There's Point Break, Apocalypto, Casino Royale. There is one in that as well. I don't know if it's one of the best. Raising Arizona and The Bourne Ultimatum, and the only movie out of all of that predates Point Break is Raising Arizona, and it's only by 4 years, 1987 to 1991. So
I haven't seen Raising Arizona, so can't comment on that one. But it was certainly it was memorable, and of course, it was also come back again to the scene where he shoots hello to the muse of a show. The shooting up in the air scene obviously helped. Make it tie a knot around it.
Yeah. I'm just looking at a couple of other ones, and some of them are kind of saying like Fast Five and District 13. That one is basically a parkour movie. So yeah, that has got some pretty good ones in it.
That was a good one. Interesting. Speaking of Fast and Furious, one of the IMDb trivia items says that Fast and Furious was a remake of this, and I'm like, wow, okay. I haven't seen Fast and Furious, but maybe these films again. That's probably to extend it out again. So, extreme sports, car racing, probably not a stretch to say.
Yeah, I guess that's. I hadn't thought of it like that. It's almost like someone saying, "Oh, Underworld is a remake of Romeo and Juliet." It's like, yeah, it is. Very basically.
Yeah, there's only 7 stories in the world or something like that.
Yeah.
Apply that logic to anything, but I actually have never seen the Fast and Furious. I've only ever seen one of them, and I didn't like it. It was like about number 7, I think.
Okay. Well, you see, you've got to watch from the first through. Otherwise, you really don't get the subtleties of the performances.
Speaking of subtleties, now, you went the extra mile this week, and you watched the 2014, 15?
2015.
15 reboot / remake. Is it a remake or is it a reboot?
It's a remake or a reimagining, I guess. 2015 reimagining of Point Break, and this is the story of a young FBI agent who infiltrates an extraordinary team of extreme sports athletes he suspects of masterminding a string of unprecedented sociopathic corporate heists. They use a lot of big words in that do not.
Yeah.
What makes a intelligence in
what
this
makes
movie?
A heist sociopathic?
Oh no, I was reading that wrong. That says sophisticated.
Okay. That makes a little bit more sense.
I retract 3% of my cynicism. So this is it's not at all a surfing movie, which, is a very, very loose way of referring to the first Point Break. And they decide to adopt this idea that Point Break is in reference to your breaking point for X, Y, or Z. And they are really, in this movie, they're really, really pushing this kind of economical, climactical kind of viewpoint of the world cannot keep going the way that it is. We are doing extreme things. And this group of extreme sports athletes are doing these heists in coordination with something called, let me see if the Ozaki 8, which is apparently 8 death-defying challenges, and if you can complete all 8 of them, you reach a true level of enlightenment, etc. But you have to give back. The notion of Ozaki, who is very lazily introduced into the story, is another extreme sports athlete who is famous for kind of having this Zen-like give and take of the world with the world. And this group, they do these heists to help give back. Like they steal hundreds of thousands of dollars and from a plane that's flying over, and they dump it onto a poor area whilst they also do an extreme skydive or something like that.
So it's sort of a Robin Hood approach.
Yeah, kind of. I think that's giving it a bit too much credit, but it's along those lines. And the only star in this movie the only stars that I know of, there's Edgar Ramirez, who
I've never heard of. You mentioned last night, he was like, oh, it's Edgar Ramirez. I'd never heard of him.
Yeah, so he's kind of the Venezuelan alternative to Gerard Butler. And the way that he plays this role, the way that the role is written, and looking into the trivia, my God, they really wanted Gerard Butler for this, but they weren't able to get him.
He says a lot about the script if Gerard Butler won't do it.
Well, no, I think it was scheduling conflicts for that. but it's got a few other people in it. Like Ray Winston takes over the role of Pappas from Gary Busey. There's Teresa Palmer in it.
Australian Teresa Palmer.
Yeah. But generally a very underwritten character, nowhere near the kind of depth that Laurie Petty was given. Let me see, who else? There was... Delroy Lindo is essentially the substitute for John C. McGinley, but he's not as much of an asshole because social reforms have happened. And that is pretty much it for actors. So there is no one in there that, no disrespect to any of them, you would qualify as blockbuster actors or true...
It's a D-grade cast. I mean, Luke Bracey plays Johnny Utah, who is also an Australian. And I'd never heard of him. He has been in some stuff. He was in a G.I. Joe movie.
Yeah, he was Cobra Commander, so he was hidden behind a mask.
That's a lot. And he was in Hacksaw Ridge, apparently, which is a great, great movie. But no, I've never heard of him before. I've never seen his face.
But this movie was hanging its hat not on quality story or trying to deliver some kind of eco-warrior message or anything like that. It was hanging its hat on saying, we are doing amazing stunts. And apparently, according to the trivia, the vast majority of the stunts in this movie are real. They are getting people to actually do them. And there is undeniable impressiveness in their effort to do that. But everything, where we were praising the original Point Break for everything coming together and working as one cohesive unit to tell a great story and elevate it up, this has not got that. You do not have the bromance between Bodhi and Utah in this. You don't have that kind of bizarre kind of pseudo father-son relationship between Utah and Pappas. There's not that emotional connection between Utah and the love interest, which is Teresa Palmer's character in this version. Everything is so lackluster. This is a paint-by-numbers movie that deservedly failed at the box office. Not only is the CGI poorly implemented into these stunt sequences, but it goes back to like the early 2000s where they just thought bombastic was all that we needed. And that has thankfully generally died. There's not much of that idea of we're just going to show them lots and lots of action and not have anything else around it and not bother casting the right people for these roles or giving them an opportunity to imbue these characters with more stuff. No, this is cardboard characters and a cardboard movie attempting to be something more than it's ever going to be. Which is not surprising considering it.
Pop quiz hot shot. Which remake is the worst? Point Break, Total Recall, or RoboCop?
Ooh, because I rewatched the remake of RoboCop recently as well, because I watched the original RoboCop as well.
I would go so far. I haven't seen Point Break one, so I guess I can't say, but the Total Recall remake was kind of tragic.
You know what? I'm going to actually say that this is the worst of those three. It's a tight one between that and the remake of Total Recall, which just doesn't make any sense anyway. But RoboCop, out of those three, is the hands down winner, and that is saying something about those other two.
So that is Point Break 1991 and 2415. So round of applause to George for going the extra mile this week and watching the piece of shit remake. I wasn't going to do it.
We watched this shit, so you don't have to, ladies and gentlemen.
Pretty much. So I have taken over the reins of the link for this week and next week and after week. I am going to be at George's mercy for a while to come. But this week we are going to, as announced for people who watched last week, we are going to follow Keanu Reeves. So we're going to follow him to probably maybe his most famous role, and that is 1999, The Matrix.
I was really hoping you were just going to suddenly curveball and just go, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I was going to say, David F. stood still.
The Matrix.
The Matrix, which is going to be an interesting discussion. We talked a little about it last week, but this is one of those films that, aside from being a landmark action science fiction film, it also, the actual story itself has been, you can interpret this film to mean whatever the fuck you want it to mean. I've seen extreme left-wing political groups use it to go, this is the most left-wing film that Hollywood's ever done. I've seen extreme right-wing groups co-opt huge chunks of ideas of a film itself. We talked last week, Lily Wachowski has come out and said that this is actually about trans people, and I guess, sort of a film about their journey and their struggles to some degree. And you can see that once you run that lens over it. So that's something we'll talk a little bit more about it next week. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts, Mr. Kinglake. One thing we at some point might even be able to, now that I've figured out the technology behind it, if any of our bot listeners is interested in it, we might even be able to at some point, maybe not The Matrix, be able to organise a watch along, like a watch party on Zoom of a particular film. It's probably fucking illegal, but what are they going to do about it?
There's like, oh wait, there are 6 people watching our movie on Zoom.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I wouldn't do it on Facebook. It'd probably get pulled down. But we can. Here's the call out to anybody who listens to our podcasts.
Yeah,
you can find us on Fried Brain Productions on Facebook. George is on Twitter under Fried Brain. You can find me on Twitter at Evil Trav. Let us know if a watch party of something like The Matrix, it would be fun to do a watch party of The Matrix, but something like that would be something you'd be interested in.
Yeah. Okay, now, I have another new release movie that I would like to talk about.
Wow, go for it.
It is Project Power.
Okay, and this is the new Jamie Foxx Netflix movie, yes?
It is, yes. And I didn't go into this looking at any trailers or anything like that. I just saw it pop up and say new, and I thought, okay, it's 10:30 at night. Why not? I'll pop it on. And I was pleased to find that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is also in this, because I like him as an actor. He's a very likable character. And it's kind of a superhero-ish movie, I guess, because it's essentially about it's set in New Orleans, and I always appreciate people going, you know what, we're going to set our movie in one of the other many cities in the US. So it's nice to have a slight different change instead of New York or LA or those kinds of places. And this is a story about diverging paths or converging paths surrounding there's a group that seem to be essentially using New Orleans as its own little microcosm laboratory to test a new drug that allows the user to actually activate innate abilities within them that are apparently, in one throwaway line, seem to be generally focused around they have some kind of connection to the animal kingdom in some way. But there is also a chance that you could pop this pill and you just explode because your body cannot handle it. And I think that's kind of an interesting concept. And then we have Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character is a cop who is secretly and against department regulations is using this. He has the ability to essentially have bulletproof skin, and he is using it to help take down robbers and thieves and any criminals in the New Orleans area who are utilizing this drug for nefarious purposes. Meanwhile, the Jamie Foxx character seems to be a bit of a hunter-killer, shall we say. He's introduced in this role of he's looking for the guy, and he is going up against these sort of like people who pop the pill and gain these abilities. But Jamie Foxx never uses the thing and the pill. And throughout it, you get these mixed messages and mixed reports of Jamie Foxx might be the source of this drug. He might not be. He might be the person who's using it and kind of causing all of this trouble. So there's a bit of a mystery around that. Interweaving with that, the character who kind of brings those two others together is a young girl, and I'm just going to look up her name because she was actually really, really good, and I don't know if she's been in anything else before, but she was really quite impressive.
I've heard some fairly mixed messages about this film. I've heard some people say it has some interesting ideas, but it trails off fairly quickly and becomes a bit dull towards the end. I've heard people say they've sort of compared it to sort of some of the X-Men films, considering the idea that you take the pill and you kind of get some random ass power rather than...
It's only for 5 minutes. It only lasts 5 minutes. So that does, in the action sequences, quite often in most of them, like anytime Joseph Gordon-Levitt takes one, you see him kind of click a timer on his watch, and a lot of the criminals do the same thing. So there's this sense of urgency and agency in all the fight sequences. And like, okay, this is probably only going to last 5, maybe 6 minutes long, but I'm probably going to be taken for a ride. And if you can kind of divorce yourself from the kind of questioning it, it's a fun ride to go on. But the actress that I'm thinking of is Dominique Fishback. And it looks like she's not been in too much. She's seems to be fairly new on the scene. She was
maybe one to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, but she was very good in the role. This, to give you an idea, this I would probably put this. I've now since watched The Old Guard, and I would put this on a quality level similar to that overall. There are elements where it doesn't get it right, but this is a damn sight better than some of the previous direct-to-streaming movies that were being produced. And they are stepping up their game. Like we've talked about it a long time. At the start, when streaming services were very fresh and new, it was almost like the bargain bucket. You get a movie out, but you're lucky if it's going to be a B-grade movie. Now you're getting pretty consistently B to high B, low A grade movies are starting to come out, and you were seeing that evolution of the quality in them.
I'm seeing evolution of production value. I am not seeing evolution of quality. So the production value of a film like Old Guard was good. Parts of it would get very to very good. Of the rest of it, the writing, the acting, and the actual film itself was good. But what was that one with Ben Affleck and Charlie Hunnam? Triple
Frontier? Yeah.
Like, again, incredible production values, a shit ton of money put into it. It was a pile of shit at the end of the film now.
That was not good.
I'm not saying Old Guard was a pile of shit. We reviewed that a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was solid. But, I think we're getting... You can see the money is being pumped into these films. Netflix has all the monies to spend on stuff.
Yeah.
So you can see it's happy to spend its monies on these kind of productions. I assume they're funding them and not actually just buying them off somebody else. But you can see the money's gone in. But I haven't seen Project Power yet. I don't think we have seen beyond... What was the film that won the Academy Award? What's his name there? The Mexican director. Roma. Which was good. Other than that, I don't think we've seen anything of that quality since. I know Old Guard's not trying to be
Scorsese's
Irishman. I haven't got around to watching yet because I just haven't had 4 hours free.
It's a slog, but you cannot deny the quality in it.
I suppose, aside from films like that, which are Oscar bait, I don't think, what would interest me would be if a Tarantino, a Christopher Nolan, a James Cameron, a Steven Spielberg, that kind of, their better work, if films were kind of living up to that kind of quality, and, with the kind of production values we're used to, I still feel like a film like this or Old Guard are the kind of films that weren't good enough to be released at cinemas.
I feel like we're getting an interesting. There's a gap that is slowly bridging, but there's the ones that they are kind of going. We are investing literally everything we have into these to get that Oscar recognition on our platform of Roma and The Irishman. And then there's this other side, which is the kind of puff, the filler, the lackadaisical blockbuster stuff. And the quality of that is slowly getting better. And I think that we are going to see some hidden gems, not the movie Hidden Gems, because that was a disaster, but like those ones that might not have been necessarily, bandied around in a bit of development hell, production hell, but they get the right people, the right conditions. I think that COVID-19, the extending of this situation, I think it could potentially be very good for streaming services and that blockbuster movie. Because I remember when Bright, the Will Smith, Joel Edgerton movie, was released, and people were kind of saying, it's the first major blockbuster streaming service movie, fully dedicated, funded, produced by them, and that was quite a hot mess. I think that Old Guard, I think that Project Powers, comparing those two to something like Bright, you can see the improvement, not just in the production, but the overall finish and the collection of it. It is all slowly but surely gathering.
You don't feel like every time I watch one of these, they just kind of feel familiar. And I kind of feel like quality, like you say, quality is polished. It's polished crap. Like I haven't watched Project Power yet, and I haven't watched Extraction. But it's kind of what I would. I feel like I've already watched Extraction. So you make it seem Extraction apparently is arguably, I've heard, is one of their, if not the most watched films on Netflix ever.
Okay.
Which again explains because it's a major movie star in Hemsworth, and everybody's stuck at home, or a lot of people are stuck at home. So it's obviously doing what it needs to do for Netflix. So we're just talking purely here in terms of quality. Yeah. I don't need to watch Extraction. I feel like I've already seen it.
Yeah. You know what? These movies are kind of like when you there's Coca-Cola, the biggest brand on the planet, arguably, and then you get Coca-Cola. And it's just slightly different, and it's like just different enough that they won't get sued, but you can taste the difference.
It's the dollar store version of a Hollywood blockbuster.
Yeah.
I just feel like if Extraction were really good, the studio, I don't know if this was made specifically for Netflix or if it's something Netflix picked up and turned around or just a film that a studio thought, fuck it, I need to get some money for this and dumped it on a la 10, the Cloverfield Paradox.
Yeah.
If it was any good, they would have hung on to it for a studio release. Sorry, a cinema release. They aren't releasing the James Bond film straight to streaming yet. They aren't releasing Black Widow to the streaming services yet. I think they're releasing Tenet. Apparently, is releasing next week in some territories.
Yeah, I do not see that actually happening.
Apparently, it is. Apparently, it's releasing in parts of Australia previews in Australia next week. Not Victoria,
fucking
obviously.
Aussies.
So, Mulan has landed on Disney Plus. It's a bit different. They've got their own streaming service.
Yep.
But the actual A-grade stuff that we were expecting to come out over the last few months isn't being put on streaming services yet. So I feel like films like Extraction, films like Old Guard, if they weren't middle of the road, polished crap, we would have hung on for a cinema release. I think I'm being a bit of a complainer here. I still don't think they're quite there yet.
I think one of the biggest surprises for me in this whole thing is the fact that the X-Men New Breed movie is still slated for a cinema release, and every pundit who has seen any element of that has said, no, that's not going to do well. And you think that's a prime candidate to just be released streaming quietly, just like, oh no, it came out, you just didn't see it, blah, blah, blah. And it's still there. So it's like, okay, either the studio has a lot of hope in this, or it has been so retooled that the movie that the reviewers and previewers saw has nothing to do with it, or they just go, nah, it's X-Men, it'll still make money in the cinema, that's fine.
It could be a legal thing.
Potentially.
There was a Chris O'Dowd film from a couple of years ago, his name I can't remember right now, that through some sort of legal snafu, the insurance company basically seized and destroyed all the prints of a film, so it will never be seen.
Oh, shit.
I can't remember the exact... There's some sort of legal conjiggering that went on that led it to that point. But it's actually, they to basically cover some sort of payout, they basically, the film will never be seen.
Wow. How bizarre.
So those kind of things go on, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it will be in crap. Who knows? But so it could be something like that. It could be some sort of legal snafu, considering that Fox has just been bought by Disney. Yeah,
it was in that weird hiatus where the sale of Fox to Disney, particularly the Marvel stuff, happened just as Dark Phoenix, I think it was rwrapping up, and people were wondering if there was going to be an Easter egg at the end of it. No. And then it's like, oh, well, there's still New Breed. Maybe they're going to retool it and bring it into the new MCU series now. It's like, that's been a year and a half of kicking the can down the road. It's unlikely.
I would like to see it one day. I think it's going to see it to be a bit like when Chinese Democracy came out from Guns N' Roses. It's going to be pure bloody curiosity to see exactly what this thing is.
Yeah, and to Chinese Democracy's credit, it wasn't awful. It wasn't particularly good.
Worst thing I've ever heard. Yeah. You kind of go, what took you so fucking long?
Yeah, it was kind of like, all right, if rock and roll music was played in an elevator, that's what this would fit perfectly.
Well, it's probably a little bit harsh, but yeah, you can sort of go, okay, guys, you've been working in this thing for 20 years, and it kind of sounds like it.
Yeah, it just felt tired, but anyway.
Or you want to go the Duke Nukem, right?
Oh, yeah, no.
That had been sitting around, I've been working on for like 20 years as well, and you kind of go, this game seems really out of date.
Yeah. Hell, Fallout 76.
Somehow it's still alive.
Yeah. Those online games, they find a niche audience and they just keep on ticking.
People keep going, but I'm having fun with it. I'm having fun playing with my friends, and that's
they're allowed to.
They are allowed to. Sometimes I get cranky at people and they go, "Well, I had fun watching the Rise of Skywalker," and I go, "No."
You think you did, but you're wrong.
You guys are the reason I keep making this direct. If you keep saying if you accept mediocrity, that's all you'll ever get.
And that is his presidential pitch, ladies and gentlemen.
Don't see shit. Otherwise, they'll think we want to see it.
What have you been watching or playing or experiencing this week?
I spent a good chunk of a weekend burning through a new true crime series on Foxtel.
Okay.
I'm one of those suckers who never cancelled his Foxtel after the free trial, which is occasionally helpful because this series I've been kind of interested to see. Mm-hmm. But then other times, I'm a big fan of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver.
Oh yeah,
and that plays in US on Sunday nights, which is middle of the day Australia, Monday here. So I come home. I leave the other room and come to this room and go, I want to watch something that's a little bit relaxing, and I enjoy John Oliver. Foxtel are the prescribed broadcaster of that in Australia. They own the rights. Do you think you can watch it? No, you think it's on demand? Like if they go, no, it's on at 9:30.
Really?
If it's 7:00, I'd like to watch it now, please. They do have last week's on demand. 2 episodes behind.
Oh, for God's sake!
So I don't get it. Like, I mean, I guess they make decisions. Sorry to go off on Foxtel here for a second, but I assume they decide. I don't know how they make these decisions about what goes on. Maybe there's legal shit involved, but like, I would like to watch this show. It's a fairly famous show. It wins awards.
Yep.
It's notable. It gets write-ups in The Guardian about what they've taken the piss out of every week.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's not on demand. I have to wait until it's actually on so I can watch it, which I guess 25 years ago you would have gone, that's how television works.
Yeah.
The world has changed, Mr. Foxtel. So instead, I go, fuck it. I don't want to wait till 9:30. Something else is on at 9:30 I would like to watch. I will just torrent it and watch it now, please. So despite the fact that I actually pay for the service, which we legally broadcast it in Australia, I end up watching it on there because they don't make it easy.
Yep.
That's my little round of Foxtel over and done with for now.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say about that. The new series, the true crime series, a friend of mine in the States put me onto is called I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
I'll Be Gone in the Dark?
I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
Okay. What's that about?
A gripping examination of the unsolved crimes of a Golden State Killer who terrorized California in the 1970s and 1980s.
Okay.
The biggest interesting connection for me, my friend in the States who put me onto it, lives in Sacramento, and that's where many of this killer's crimes took place. So she was like, hey, one of the crime scenes was around the corner from my house. I went around there to have a look, and I'm like, I would so do that. If I'm ever allowed to travel again, Sacramento will probably be on my list. Despite the fact it's a very boring place because I have friends there. And I'd be like, let's go check out the murder houses.
I do apologize to all our Sacramento listeners, all minus one of you.
Yeah. Anyone who lives there knows it's not a very exciting part of the world. It's like just like traveling halfway around the world to visit Geelong. You only do it if you have a very good reason. So I'll Be Gone in the Dark is, as it says, an exploration of the Golden State Killer who is now in custody. Also known as the East Area Rapist or the original Night Stalker. I guess what makes this a little bit different is it is based on a book written by what's her freaking name? I'm going to get her name right. It's Patton Oswalt's wife. Now, I feel horrible saying that about her because she actually does have a name. Listen, I can't think of it off the top of my head because I found that the least interesting part of the show. But Patton Oswalt's wife, Michelle McNamara. So apologies to anybody who was offended by the fact I could remember her other than the fact that she's married to Patton Oswalt. Michelle McNamara, who became a bit of a minor celebrity in the true crime world. She wrote a book called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which was released posthumously because she is passed away now. Mm-hmm. And this is based on her book.
Okay.
Where there are 6 episodes. It is a mini series. I guess they're a short series rather than a movie or anything of that nature. Where I struggle with this is I'm a big fan of true crime. Mm-hmm. I have read a book about the Golden State Killer before. It is an interesting story in the sense it's one of those fascinating murders where the guy, like, he fucking did a lot of crimes. He didn't kill that many people, which sounds horrible. I think he killed about 5 or 6 murders, I think. So maybe 8 or 9 people in total, which is a lot. But he was incredibly prolific in terms of rapes and other crimes earlier on in his career, for want of a better term. But the city of Sacramento was terrorized by this guy for years and years and years. His crime stretched over at well over a decade, I think. And somehow he wasn't captured until a few years ago, just a couple of years ago, he was arrested. And what is an interesting story about how he was arrested is the way he was arrested is a fairly new development in crime investigation, for want of a better term, in the sense that he left DNA at crime scenes back in the 70s and 80s when DNA we didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
But are you familiar with, like, in Australia it's called Ancestry.com, in the States it's called, like, 23andMe?
Oh, yeah.
You submit your DNA and they tell you, hey, you've got a second cousin and your family came from blah place.
Yeah.
So there's actually an official term for this, and I can't think of it off my head. But basically, there are large public databases in the US. I think they're based in the US, where they store lots of people's familial DNA. So what they did is they plugged this guy's DNA into that database of, you know, people who've submitted their DNA for, you know, their heritage testing and finding out their family tree, and they use this public database to find out, well, this guy's not in the database, but his third cousin or something is.
Okay.
And then they build a family tree and go, well, they've got this common ancestor who is this person, and they track it back down. And then they go, well, he was in Sacramento at this time, and we think he had these characteristics, and that leaves them with a short list of people who it could potentially be. And then you just focus in on that short list of people who, you know, potentially could be the killer. And that's actually how they track this guy down.
Wow.
It was, through you know, I can't remember the name, but family trees and stuff like that. So it's going to kick myself. It's going to come to me later. But and that's a really innovative way. I'm getting to the point, I promise. It's an innovative way they caught him. It's an interesting story that he got away with it for so long. He was a horrible yet fascinating character.
Okay.
But what this film, the series, focuses, I would hazard a guess, spends probably half its time on Michelle McNamara herself.
I was going to say, because I'm looking at the cast thing here, and the first four actors, obviously Patton Oswalt is in it as himself, and every character seems to be Michelle's husband, Michelle's researcher, Michelle McNamara. It all seems to be focused around her. So is it not necessarily, is this tangentially about the Golden State Killer, or is this about how I wrote my book?
Both.
Okay.
It's just weird, right? Like, it's a very unusual hybrid story where, like I said, we probably spend, the show will be about, this is a horrible crime that this guy committed, and here's some archival footage of what was going on, and, you know, the standard kind of things you expect in a high-quality, HBO-produced crime documentary. And then we'll just spend 10 minutes with Patton Oswalt talking about how he met his wife. And, like, archival footage of Michelle talking about shit, and, like, her family talking about how amazing she was, and her talking about her childhood. Even though she's passed, I assume she, as you can see there are people she was a prolific writer, so she wrote extensively about all sorts of parts of her life, and those are actually read on screen, journal entries and articles and stuff like that, and blog posts. So I'd actually start to get frustrated at points in time because I don't care who she is. I'm sorry. I'm sure she was lovely. Patton Oswalt seems, like he loved her truly and genuinely, which one would hope of your wife. And her late wife, and that is tragic that she passed so young. But I'm not watching this show. If you want to make a documentary about your wife, make a fucking documentary call it My Wife by Patton Oswalt. Don't make a story about the Golden State Killer and then have half of it being about how awesome your wife was. And I mean, that's how it felt like to me. So this is made posthumously, because the book was published posthumously, I think, from memory. I'm pretty sure it was. And this is certainly made a couple of years after her death as well. So I'm sure, I haven't looked into it, I'm fairly certain this is a, passion project of someone like Patton Oswalt, who has a fair bit of clout in Hollywood these days. Mm-hmm. The book itself was a bestseller, so by no means was it an obscure property that HBO decided to option and turn to a series. Yeah. But it felt like as much of a love letter to his wife as it was a documentary about the killer. Which some people are listening going, hey, you must be pretty fucked up to be concerned about the fact that this has got too much about how much the guy loved his wife. And yes, you would be correct. I am extremely fucked up. A wise and astute observation, dear listener. You are certainly a king among men. But being a horrible human being that I am, I enjoy watching and listening to crime documentaries about the crime stuff, not the actual person who wrote the book about the crime. And I mean, it was something. I mean, is interesting. They are basically kind of going. Michelle McNamara played a significant part in getting this guy caught.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that's true.
It kind of sounds like, oh, you know what? We're going to do a Terminator movie, and we're going to do it about the guy who created the CPU processor that isn't Niles Dyson. It's the guy that literally made the casting mold to create the CPU.
The guy who cleaned Miles Dyson's toilets the day he got shot. You know, I mean, that's it. Don't
I would actually kind of watch that.
don't give them ideas, but they will make a Miles Dyson film. They'll do it. So that was, it's good in the sense the production value is great. It's HBO. They've got, again, all the money in the world. They make high quality stuff. The research is good. The interviews are interesting when they finally get around to catching the killer. There's a guy named Joseph DeAngelo. They get interviews with some very interesting. They actually meet and talk to some of his family members. His ex-wife, or an ex-fiance, or ex-girlfriend of his. Some of his nephew, I think, maybe a brother. And it's like, and that's great. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. You actually got these guys to talk about a very infamous killer.
Yeah.
So that's good, and it's the archival footage is wonderful. It's the research is great. The way it looks, it's shot is wonderful. I get a real sense of place for me, having spent a reasonable amount of time in Sacramento visiting my friends who live there. I almost recognize some of the neighborhoods. It's a city that has a fairly distinct look if you spend a little time there. But I just feel like I'd just be getting into the story and be like, let's spend 10 minutes talking about Michelle's childhood and how she didn't get along with her mother. I don't care. I don't care. I don't find her very interesting. Probably a very good author, good researcher, good for her. That's not what the show should be about. So it was a frustrating yin and yang. Whenever you get those shows or a show like occasionally, like, wow, when you're actually on your main topic, you're doing very well. When you get off topic and start saying how wonderful the author who wrote the book that this is based on was, it kind of would lose me. I'd get my phone out and be like, for 5 minutes and be like, oh, cool, we're talking about people getting killed again. I want to watch that.
Oh, shit. We have to think we've just isolated why we don't have more viewers.
Because I'm a horrible human being?
Because of just go, look over here for a moment. Oh, I'm back here.
I like to think it's part of our charm.
That's true. That's true.
That's what our show is. The show could be summed up as Squirrel.
That would actually be a great name for a podcast.
Squirrel. So it's different. If that was, we're comedians and speakers who I enjoy that kind of thing from. If you're selling me a crime documentary, be about the crime.
Yeah. I mean, it's. No one likes being sold a false bill of goods, It's like, this will make you 1,000 times more attractive. No, it won't. You're going to feel cheated and disappointed. And I think that if there's so much of the story about Michelle in this series, why not just have a passion project about her and lead it up to the creation of this book and bring it into that?
Or we could have had maybe the first episode, half the first episode would have bought that.
Yeah.
Going, this is how the author, this is where she started, this is how she got into writing true crime, and, then move into telling us about the Golden State Killer. I mean, maybe almost like a postscript going, this is what happened, my wife died, yada, yada, yada. This has almost been made a true. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. Like my friend in the States, she loved it. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but if you do you have access to Foxtel or you're in another country where you have access to the HBO streaming stuff, HBO Max, or you have it as part of your cable package in the US, or I don't even know what you have access to HBO in other countries, I'm sure, via various methods. You like true crime? You can give it a go. It's pretty good. I mean, I watched all of it, but just be on guard that you're going to get a lot of fluff along with the good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Good. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about today, or shall we actually have a quick quick episode this week.
This was an hour tonight. Jesus Christ, what a
Yeah,
treat.
I know.
What a treat.
Yeah.
You should be writing thank you letters and sending us roses. I don't have anything specific to talk about. I have just downloaded Superhot VR for my Oculus headset.
Nice. I enjoyed that game on the regular version. I can imagine the VR being quite fun too.
So I had a quick poke around it this afternoon. I have an awkward thing in my this is the second podcast from my new residence. It's quite a long house. In the front room, you'll get to know it, people, because that will be where I will be podcasting once I'm set up with a new desk and everything in there. But it's so far away from the back here via Wi-Fi, it doesn't reach up there very well. So I have to come back here with my headset on, download the games, update it, and then walk all the way back up there.
Can't you just have a long cable going?
I bought a Wi-Fi extender. And
those extenders aren't great.
We will see. We'll see. Otherwise, I'm just going to clear this room a little bit and play in here. The only problem with Superhot is you need a fair bit of space.
Yeah.
You're reaching for things and dodging bullets and stuff like that. So we'll hopefully have something. It'll be something I can give an update on next week. Other than that, I would like to say that long-term listeners, if there are any of you might remember, many years ago, I was working on a separate podcast project. I'm now working on two separate podcast projects. One will be King for a Day. So I feel like I'm cheating on George here. You just go away. Don't pay attention.
It's fine. It's fine. I've got my D&D sessions that you're not invited to.
You change, man. So I am going to be trialing some product, some content soon, where we will be reviewing Stephen King properties, King for a Day, and there'll be a separate podcast currently operating under the working title Backchat, where I will be revisiting. Me and my co-host will be revisiting films from our childhood and going, do they hold up to 2020 standards? And we will be providing a social justice warrior, feminist, LGBTIQA dissection of films from the 80s. So that's going to be a whole barrel of laughs. So tune in for that one.
Yeah. And as for me, this.
We can have you as a guest star. But I have, I live alone. And I still can't go out for another month. So I need to do something that's not playing video games or watching TV or working.
That's fair. I'll allow it.
You can allow it.
Yes.
The most magnanimous of you, sir.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that has been a swift episode of Armchair Producers this week. We reviewed Point Break 1991 version, as well as a quick lambasting of the 2015 version. I talked about Project Powers, now streaming on Netflix. Travis talked about I'll Be Gone in the Dark on HBO and HBO affiliated streaming services, or the wonderful thing of illegal downloads. And next week in our chain movie sessions, we will be onto the 1999 classic, The Matrix.
And do stay tuned, because I have been the film after The Matrix is the whole point of Point Break and The Matrix. And I've been wanting to make George watch this for years, and I have probably already made him watch it and forgotten about it, but it's going to be fun.
And I will. I have started watching my way through the Ip Man series with Donnie Yen, and so I will have some more thoughts on that next week.
Groovy.
So until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we will see you next week.
Good night.